Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Kaylee Grows, and today, if you guys watched my last video, you would have known that I'm moving. So today I am just going to be going through all of the plants that I'm going to be keeping, and I'm going to be repotting the ones that need to be repotted, because I have a couple of pots that I would like to keep. And then I'm going to be trimming a decent amount of plants just so they're a little bit more manageable when I'm shipping them around. So in my last video, I decided to get rid of half of my plants. So I have between 50 and 60 plants that I'm going to be taking with me. I am moving from Tennessee to Texas. So this is going to be a pretty huge move, the biggest one that I've ever done. So yeah, I honestly don't even really know where to begin. I think I'm going to begin with like trimming some plants, and then if I have time later on, I'm going to repot some plants as well. But yeah, so let's begin, I guess. All right, so I have 6 plants with me. I'm going to be going through, and instead of like talking through what I'm going to be doing, I thought I might as well kind of do a little story time with you guys. So yeah, I'm just going to be trimming up all these plants, and yeah, pretty much just making them shorter so they're easier to ship. So yeah, so if you guys do not know me, I am a marine biologist. So I grew up in New Jersey when I was very, very young. I lived there up until I was about 18. So that was about until college. So I lived there until I went to college. And then when I never really fit in there. I just kind of knew that I was supposed to be out of the tiny little town that I grew up in. I just like didn't like the same things as everyone else. I wasn't super into like the things to do around there, which is fine. So when it was time for me to go off to college, I started looking out of state. I guess I should rewind a little bit more. When I was in middle school, I was a very artsy-fartsy kid. I always wanted to do music or something of the arts when I grew up. But when I graduated 8th grade, my cousin was living in Miami, and she was also a marine biologist. And she was like, hey, for 8th grade graduation, how about you send down me and my other cousin, for us to kind of celebrate our graduation, have a little bit of independence for the first time in our lives, fly us down from New Jersey and do this like summer camp that she was hosting, I guess. And we did it. So I went down to Miami, and the first couple of days she was not there. So her boyfriend at the time was taking care of me and my cousin. She was out of town for like a day or two when we first got there. And he had us walk the beaches at night. So when we did that, I saw a sea turtle for the first time. And the first one that we saw, I saw sea turtles hatch out of their nest. And then the next night, we saw a mama turtle lay eggs. And both of those just completely changed my world. So instead of wanting to do art, I wanted to do marine biology. It completely changed me. So when I went into high school, like I said, I didn't really fit in. I was like I guess I should say like wannabe theater kid. I was never like good enough or outgoing enough to actually be in the theater, but like I loved music and stuff. So I kind of hung out with the other theater kids. I was also a little bit athletic because I'm pretty tall. So I kind of did that stuff, but by the time it was time to look for colleges, I was like still gung-ho marine biology. I tried to take as many science classes as I could in high school, and I ended up taking as many as I can. I took as much math as I could, and finally it was time to apply to colleges. At the time, I wanted to go to University of Miami because that's where my cousin went for her master's. That's where she lived. That's where I had all of my beginning experiences with sea turtles and such. So I was like, that's it. I want to go to Miami. So I toured a couple of schools. I toured 2 up in Rhode Island, which would be closer to home. Wasn't a huge fan. And then I toured 3 in Florida, FIT, Florida Institute of Technology, Eckerd, University of Miami. I thought there was one more, but I can't remember off the top of my head. And everything was like fine. This story might be slightly out of order of which colleges I saw when, but everything was fine. I still thought the University of Miami campus was beautiful. I still really, really wanted to go there. But I also toured 2 schools, one of them in North Carolina and one of them in South Carolina. And one of them in North Carolina was UNCW, and the other one in South Carolina was Coastal Carolina. And I absolutely thrived at UNCW. I was always a very shy kid, so I was okay stepping away from my mother. I was up front with the other kids talking to the tour guides, and yeah, like I just kind of like was coming out of my shell for the first time in my life. And wow, this plant is so much smaller now, but it needed it. It really, really needed it. But yeah, I was just like being the best version of myself. And then I went over to Coastal Carolina, and it was just not for me. It felt a lot like my high school. Like it had the same vibe as the high school that I went to. So I just like wasn't really interested. So then it was time to apply to schools, and I really wanted to go to either Miami or UNCW. Both of those were still my top 2. I had a couple of backups just in case, but like I still really, really wanted those 2 schools. I was all nervous because UNCW, they didn't accept many out-of-state students. It was only like 14% out of state or something like that. So I was like, there's no way I'm going to get in. I like didn't have bad grades, but my grades weren't like, I wasn't valedictorian or anything like that. So I was very involved. I had a lot of clubs and stuff. So I was thinking maybe that would save me. But I applied to all the schools. I got into all the schools I applied for with like an asterisk on one. Asterisk. I can't speak. University of Miami I got into, but I got no money, and that was the most expensive school that I applied to. And I would have had to go to DC for the first, I think, semester, because they wanted us to do more of like marine policy. So I got into like a different program than I wanted. So that kind of broke my heart at the time. But after a couple of weeks and lots of sulking, I decided that I was not going to go to Miami. I think there was a lot more like meltdowns, that I'm making this seem a lot more chill than it actually was. But I decided to go to UNC Wilmington. And that is where I went. I went there for 4 years. I absolutely loved it. I went down, I finally fit in. I made some of the best friends I've ever had. I still love those girls. I still go down to see them. They're some of my best friends. And I still absolutely love Wilmington. If I could get a job in Wilmington, I would move back in a heartbeat because I just absolutely loved it there and I miss it every single day. It just is the one place that I really felt like I fit in my entire life. So, yeah, so I did 4 years there. I moved there without knowing anybody down in Wilmington. There was a girl who was like a friend of a friend who was going there. So I kind of hung out with her the first day or so, but I didn't really see her very much. But we just didn't have like a ton in common. She was in the honors dorm. I was not. So, like, she was hanging out with the people she was living with, of course, because that's just what happens. And, yeah, so when I did orientation, which I was still in high school for, I sat next to this girl who I was like, wow, like, she is so cool, so smart, because she just kind of seemed like she understood what was going on a lot more than I did. And yeah, I was like, wow, this girl's really cool. Didn't like get her number, didn't get her Instagram, anything like that. But then I moved down to Wilmington and I was in my, like, I don't even remember how, I think it was like the first day of class. And I found out that that girl was in a bunch of my classes. So her name is Caitlin, and I owe my entire like college life to her. And yeah, so she pretty much saved me. I didn't really get along with my roommate. She was going through a lot of stuff. She went to UNCW to be with her boyfriend, and then they broke up, and she just like wasn't very happy. We just like weren't meant to be friends. So I tried to spend as much time as I could outside of my room. But with that being said, I'm going to switch out some plants. All right, so I actually ended up having so much fun with Caitlin and her friends that I actually moved down a floor from the 6th floor to the 5th floor so I could hang out with my friends even more often. I did move in with a girl that like I'm not really friends with anymore, but that's fine. You don't have to be like super close with your roommates, especially your freshman year. We still follow each other on Instagram. I still like wish her the best, but we're just not like crazy close. Yeah, I ended up moving down to their floor and I spent all of my time with them. I ended up meeting a guy that year who I ended up dating for the rest of college. And yeah, so I spent the days that I wasn't studying, I spent paddleboarding and going to the beach and hanging out with my friends. We weren't like huge partiers, so we didn't really go to like big college parties or anything like that. We went every once in a while, of course. We were still college kids, but it wasn't like every single night like some places. That also wasn't like UNCW at the time. But I had so much fun. My sophomore year, I actually ended up moving in with Caitlin, the same girl. Her roommate at the time, Alex. We had a huge dorm. There was 8 girls all living there. So it was Caroline and me shared a bathroom, and then there was Anna and I don't know who ended up moving into that room. I think Sophia moved into that room because that room was empty for a little bit. They shared a bathroom. And then on the other side was Caitlin and Alex, and then Maddie and Kate. So Kate actually did not know us. She was very, very shy. Awesome girl. So like I was very, very happy to have her live with us, which was cool. But she ended up coming into our friend group, which is really cool. And yeah, so my sophomore year was great. I loved it. We moved into like an apartment type dorm, and it was a ton of fun. And then my sophomore year, I actually studied abroad. So I studied abroad in Townsville, Australia. And here, I was able to scuba dive a decent amount. I volunteered for a little while at a sanctuary that had like kangaroos and wombats and things like that. That was a really cool experience. I didn't do that for a super long time because I didn't have a car, so getting there was hard. But yeah, that was a blast. I had a ton of fun in Australia. It is a beautiful place. And I actually went with one of the girls that I lived with my sophomore year, Alex. So she came with me. I actually like really wanted to study abroad alone. I did not want to go with anyone else. And she came to me one day and she was like, hey, do you want to study abroad with me? And I was like, dude, yeah, like let's go. Cause I loved Alex and she ended up being a ton of fun there. And she actually liked it so much that she went back to vet school in Australia, which is awesome. Actually at this point, I think I'm going to repot. I think I'm going to like split this plant up because I don't want to keep as big of a plant. But yeah. Australia, I loved it there. I highly recommend studying abroad if you can afford it. It wasn't crazy expensive for me. I was going to school out of state in North Carolina, so it wasn't like a ton more for me to study abroad in Australia. I just had to pay for like the more money was more for like the field trips, the traveling, that kind of stuff. So the dorm and the tuition and the flight were kind of like a similar price to my tuition at UNCW. So highly recommend if you can do it. And then after Australia, I came back home to New Jersey. At the time I worked in a hospital, so I just worked there throughout the summer. Then I moved into my junior year. So my junior year, I moved into another on-campus apartment type thing, and I lived with Caitlin and Alex and Caroline. And again, we had a blast. The first semester, I just like focused on my studies. And then the second semester, I actually got an internship at the local sea turtle hospital. And I loved it. Sea turtles had been like my love ever since I saw the ones hatch and lay eggs and such. Actually, I think I'm going to cut that back even more. I wanted to work with sea turtles really, really bad. So I ended up doing an internship. And this was unpaid. I went out there on my weekends, on like Saturdays or something, and I helped at the hospital. So I'll probably pin this one down at some point. But I did that. I absolutely loved it. I was never able to go to a sea turtle release, but I was like, wow, I love this. And I loved my sea turtles so much that I was like, let me see if I can work with sea turtles again over the summer. I talked to my counselor and she was trying to get me to be really well-rounded. And she was like, hey, you should try something besides like actively working with sea turtles. Like you should try education or something. And I was like, okay. So I applied to a couple of education jobs. I applied to like everywhere they had sea turtles, but like I would be doing education at the facility that had sea turtles. So, so I ended up going to an internship at Bald Head Island Conservancy, and I was an education intern there. I did not actively work with the sea turtles, but I taught about the sea turtles, which was pretty neat. I learned that I was a pretty good educator, and I really liked it. But I really did miss working with the turtles. I did not have the most fantastic grades in college. I did, I'm not going to say like crazy recently, but like after college, I did find out that I most likely have ADHD. I did talk to a couple of my therapists about it, and they are on the same page. So I just don't think I did the best in college just because like my focus just wasn't there. I didn't really know how to help myself focus as much. This one I'll probably pin as well. Oh, I dropped my pin. So I was kind of thinking that I wouldn't be able to do research. I also wasn't really sure if I was going to be able to get into grad school. So I was like, oh, I'm pretty good at this whole education thing. I guess I'll continue with this. But I still loved working with animals. So I was like, okay, maybe I could do something else with animals. Then I worked at a kennel for a little while during the year, just working with dogs for just more animal experience and such. Didn't last a super long time my senior year. So I really tried to focus on my studies. I almost didn't graduate on time, but during that time, I was volunteering at the local aquarium, so the North Carolina Aquarium at Fort Fisher, and I was doing education there until I could be part of their dive team. So then I was diving a couple times a week, and I loved it. I was also teaching there, and it was fantastic. So I then started working there. I would work there. I started my, like right around spring break, my senior year. They kind of were like, Kelly, you need to work here. You're here enough. And I was like, okay. So I just did guest services. I sold tickets. I then in the summer worked in like their bungalows. They had lorikeets one year, butterflies the next. So I did that the summer, like the spring into summer of my senior year. And then I took my very last class, a summer class, and that meant that I was completely done with college. I graduated. I walked with my friends that May, which was great. And yeah, then I was ready for my next adventure. So July, I moved on. So that July, I actually got an internship, which was like one of the coolest experiences of my life, in Hawaii. So I moved to Hawaii for July through December of that year, and I was working with hawksbill sea turtles. I would hike from different locations to different beaches. There was like 4 main beaches that we would go to, and we would camp for a couple of days, and we would work with the turtles. I was there closer to the end of the season, so it was mostly working with hatching turtles rather than the moms, but I was absolutely loving it. At very first, I thought that I wasn't going to be able to do it. I actually hurt my back pretty badly in January of that year, so I had to work really hard to get back into shape to be able to hike and to be able to carry my backpack and things like that. So I worked really hard. I went on walks with Night every day, going longer and longer, but I still just like was not prepared for the heat of Hawaii. So I really thought that I wasn't going to be able to do it because I almost got like heat exhaustion once during one of our first hikes. So that was wild. But I ended up absolutely loving it. It was one of the coolest experiences of my life. My boyfriend and I at the time broke up while I was there. So that's the same guy that I was dating from my freshman year. And we went our separate ways, and I kind of found myself that summer. So I ended up traveling by myself. After I was done with the internship, I kind of island hopped a couple different places. I stayed with some people that I knew from like college, on Maui, and then I stayed with one of the girls that I did the internship with on Oahu. And I kind of came to the conclusion that like I'm a pretty cool person. I like myself. I was always so shy and so timid, and I just like wasn't very like proud of myself. And I was like, why? Literally, why? So I ended up realizing like I'm pretty cool. Like I deserve the world. So I came into that realization, which was great. And I ended up moving back to New Jersey because my ex and I at the time were living together. So he had all my stuff down in North Carolina. Wow, just this piece right here had all those roots. And I cut that off a while ago. But actually, this looks really good. But I moved back to New Jersey after doing all of that. I was determined to get back down to North Carolina because I loved it so much. That was like my home. And I did. I ended up getting the same job back at the aquarium. So doing education or doing guest services again. And I went back down. But before I did that, I actually met Ryan. We met on a dating site. So it was actually Tinder that we met each other. And we hit it off. I thought that he was just going to be like someone that I hung out with while I lived in New Jersey. I didn't think anything was going to come of it. But he asked me to continue things. That's literally how he said it. I didn't realize that meant he wanted to date me for a little while. But yeah, so we decided to date even when I moved down to North Carolina. He was actually traveling for work at the time. So it's not even like if I stayed in New Jersey that we wouldn't have been long distance. No matter what, we would have been long distance. So I moved back down. I did guest services for a little while. And then I actually got a education internship at the aquarium. So I was able to teach while I was there. So I would teach programs. I would kind of be one of the people standing at the exhibits talking. But yeah, I actually didn't bring any soil upstairs. So I'm going to go and get some of that. But yeah, I ended up doing an internship. Actually, I skipped back a little bit. I met a girl named Cassidy when I was working at the aquarium the first summer. So when I was doing guest services the first summer around. So when I moved back down to North Carolina, I needed a roommate. So I actually moved back in with her downtown Wilmington, which was really great. Then she moved back into college, and I moved back in with my friends in the house that I lived in my senior year. So that was kind of cool to live in the same house. I loved that house. It was right next to campus, which meant that it was next to a lot of really fun things. And that's where I lived when I did the education internship at the aquarium. Okay, I'm going to repot another plant, but I'm not sure which one yet. So I have to figure that out. Okay. But while I was doing that education internship, my boss was this woman named Marissa. I don't know if I should call her a woman or a girl. She's not like that much older than me, but she was always like my superior. So, but she was an awesome boss, like one of the best bosses I ever had. And I loved working for her. And yeah, so when I was done with that internship, I was going to go back to doing guest services, but that was a lot of dirt everywhere. But I applied for a job in the education department, kind of doing what I was doing, but actually getting paid for it. And it was going to be temporary. It was just going to be seasonal, but it was still something. I did not get that job. And then the next time a job came around, it was the assistant outreach coordinator. Instead of just like a T1 educator, it was assistant outreach coordinator. And I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, that sounds awesome. So I actually did get this job, and this job was really cool. With this job, I actually traveled the state with different animals. So I had alligators, like baby alligators, snakes, turtles, lizards, frogs, and then I also had some marine animals like sea stars and oh, that's cute. Sea stars and hermit crabs and whelks. And I took all of those to different schools all around the state, mostly low-income schools, which was really cool. And I would travel with those animals and go teach about them in schools. I thought this job was awesome, but it was still only part-time. While I was interning, I was applying to jobs all over the place because I didn't want to like go back to being jobless. And I applied to a senior educator job at Bald Head Island Conservancy, which is the same place that I did my original internship at. And I was like, okay, like that might be cool to go back there. I didn't have like the best experience as an intern, but I was like, maybe I can make a difference. That would be really cool. And I did not get the job, but they said, we're looking for someone with more experience, but do you mind if we keep your name in mind in case we have another job come up? And I was like, sure. I heard so many other places say that, and I was not expecting anything. So I ended up doing the outreach coordinator, assistant outreach coordinator, but it was only part-time. It was really hard to like have a social life because I was out of town literally all the time. And I never knew when my hours were going to be. They were kind of all over the place. But it was such a fun job. So I was like, that's fine. Like, whatever, like it kind of sucks, but like, it's going to be fine. It's great. So I, wasn't applying to other jobs. I was actually very happy where I was. My supervisor at the time, who I liked very, very much, she was actually working towards getting me to be full-time so that I could have benefits and things like that. So I was like, that's really cool. But I get an email from Bald Head Island Conservancy saying, hey, we're actually hiring a coastal educator, which is a step down from the senior educator, and we think you would be a great fit. Would you like to interview? And I was like, wow, I didn't expect to hear from you guys. Sure, I would love to interview. I'm going to put this guy back, and then I'm going to grab another plant to repot. So yeah, I got an interview at the Bald Head Island Conservancy, and I was like, wow, that's cool. And it was full-time, which I had never had a full-time job before. I was working like multiple jobs at the time. And yeah, I was like, sure, I'll interview. Wasn't really expecting much, but I ended up getting the job. It was awesome. I was like, wow, full-time job. I knew that I was pretty good at teaching at that point. So I was like, awesome, yeah, I'll totally do it. And I worked there for 2.5 years. The whole time, I wouldn't say I was necessarily happy, but I wasn't necessarily unhappy. I mostly just missed working with animals. I realized that the jobs that I liked the most were when I was in Hawaii, obviously, because it's Hawaii, and when I was working at Karen Beasley. So I started volunteering at Karen Beasley again, and I realized how much I missed it. So I started applying to all sorts of animal care jobs, like so many animal care jobs. And that's all I was applying for. I applied to probably over 100 animal care jobs before I finally interviewed places. And I interviewed for a couple of them. I interviewed for a couple at the aquarium and things like that. I never got them. They told me I needed more experience, which I was like, I'm like 25 at this point. Like, I don't know where I'm going to get more animal care experience that is paid unless I like drop out of my full-time job and start interning again, which I didn't want to do. And I applied literally everywhere, like all over the country. Ryan was just like ready to move. Ryan moved down with me a year and a half after we started dating. So that was a little after I started at Bald Head. We moved in together, and yeah, so we were just like ready to move wherever. One day I was sitting at the info desk after COVID, and I got a text from Cassidy, my old roommate. And she was like, hey, are you still looking to do animal care jobs? And I was like, yeah. She was like, I am working at the Ripley's Aquarium of the Smokies in Gatlinburg, and we're hiring someone, and I would vouch for you if you would want the job. And I was like, heck yes, I would want the job. So I applied immediately. I interviewed not long later, and I got the job. I had never been to Gatlinburg. I had only been to the Smokies once, and that was actually that winter. So wasn't a super long time, but like that was on the North Carolina side rather than the Tennessee side. So I was like, that's fine. I guess I'm moving to Tennessee. So I quit the job at Bald Head, which I do have to say Bald Head was very, very cool. I had to take a ferry to work. We drove golf carts around the island. Very, very cool. I loved being outside all the time for my job, but I just missed working with animals. So I started working with animals for the first time, truly, when I started working at Ripley's. All right, this one's big, so I might be blocking my face for most of it. But I got the job at Ripley's, and I moved out to Tennessee, and I was finally working with animals for the first time. Holy crap, the roots. I don't have a bigger pot for this. This pot is like the same size. Okay, that kind of sucks, but it's gonna have to do for now. But I learned so much during my time there. We train how to work with literally all the animals at the aquarium. I learned how to work with everything from jellyfish to seahorses to sea dragons to the sharks to the stingrays to the frogs and the reptiles. And yeah, so I started off in a zone that I had pufferfish and flashlight fish, and then I moved on to a zone where I was kind of like the reptile girl, and I worked with our iguanas and then our frogs as well. So I guess herp girl, not just reptiles. But I loved it. I learned so much. I ended up going to amphibian school this March, and I learned so much about exhibit design and about amphibians and things like that. I just feel like I learned so much. And I really liked working at Ripley's, but I knew that I didn't want to live in Tennessee forever. So I wasn't necessarily looking for other jobs, but whenever a job that I knew would be like my dream job, like a sea turtle job came up, I would apply. So I did that a couple of times. I interviewed for a job down in Georgia, and then a job in Texas, and that's where we come to right now. But yeah, that's where we are today. I am now moving down to Texas to do my dream job. So I am moving down. I'm not going to say exactly where because I don't want to like ask for a stalker or anything. But I am moving down to Texas to work at a sea turtle hospital. I have been wanting to do this pretty much like most of my life at this point. So I was 14 when I saw those sea turtles hatch and lay eggs for the first time. And here I am at 28, finally doing it. I can't believe it. I really can't. I am so excited to go down there. Especially because this week we had a ton of snow in Tennessee and I miss the beach. But yeah, I just can't believe that I'm finally here and that I waited around enough for this job to finally happen. And by the time this video goes out, I think
I don't know why my microphone keeps dying, but by the time this video goes out, I will be in Texas. I will be starting this dream job. I will be actually there and doing what I really, really wanted. And I'm just so, so, so excited. But yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that you guys liked hanging out with me for a little while. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps my channel out a lot. If you guys like me, subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you. And I hope to see you guys again on the next one, where I'll be in Texas. Bye.